And we are live. Coming back to the screen, going full screen. Hello, and welcome to Fermenting Opinions. I'm your host, David Papide, and James McVeigh is not with us tonight. This is a Fermenting Opinions Hangout. Tonight we're going a little bit off script. And it's mostly because we've been having a little bit of back and forth in the discussion group, primarily with our friend Chris, who is a brave soul to join us tonight, and he has some strong opinions about things, and we've not really gotten to get into those conversations as much as I would like to. And in my own experience, I know that having Facebook debates is about the most useless masturbatory thing that you can do. And I think there's a much better chance of persuasion, or at least giving the other person more to think about and give sincere consideration to when you have a face-to-face conversation. So that's one thing that we're going to try tonight. And on the docket, we are going to be talking about school vouchers and these are two great big topics. We're going to be talking about school vouchers a little bit. And we're also going to be talking about abortion, the legality of it, personhood, and all those little rabbit trails that we might get into as part of that. If you guys are good, I would go ahead and start with the voucher issue. As myself, a big believer in church-state separation, I look at vouchers as, even though they've been adjudicated otherwise, as unconstitutional because it's funneling public tax money out of school systems and into private religious schools, and to me that constitutes an endorsement of religion, and that's one issue I have with school vouchers. Like, this is the whole Betsy DeVos model, the education secretary, and also the fact that vouchers just plain don't work, which is really the tack that most people who are anti-voucher take with it, because we can argue about the legalities and the constitutionality of it, but you can't argue, I don't think, with the notion that any place where the voucher systems have been running for a number of years, and you have you can gather data on what are the outcomes in terms of achievement and in terms of school success. You see that they either do just as poorly as they were doing without vouchers, or they're doing worse. Really, I don't know of any case where school performance and academic achievement has actually improved because of a voucher program. And so my position is, not today, not tomorrow, not ever. But Chris, you had some criticism of that, if I recall.
Well, I did a little bit of a cursory search thanks to the internet, which we all know is never wrong. And there's actually a pretty good article that was written that compares 4 cases. 2 are pretty much positive, 2 are negative or neutral. It looks like Milwaukee and Washington, D.C. both had pretty successful cases, whereas Louisiana, just in general, and New York did not. So, there's a few issues. So first of all, I think the first problem, and this is not a voucher versus public school problem, I think that the first thing we have to really think about is how do we even assess student achievement and success. Every measure of outcome for education is based on standardized testing, which I think a lot of people probably agree is a little bit problematic. But on the other hand, is there any other way to really quantify achievement? So, that's a bit of a problem. My thing about, and here's the other issue that I have. I'm not necessarily advocating for religious school, although I will tell you, in the interest of transparency, that if I had the choice to send my child, I don't have a child yet, we're hoping to adopt, but if I had the choice to send my child to a was in line with my rather, believe it or not, liberal Christian values, I probably would do that. But on the other hand, I'm a pretty staunch advocate of church and state, so I don't really have any problem with it.
You've cut out completely. I'm really sorry. Chris, the last thing you said, could you repeat it?
When did I cut out?
You said an advocate or a big proponent of...
Yeah, so I'm an advocate of church-state logic of not wanting to use tax money to fund religious schools. Right. My preference for private school is simply because I feel in so many ways, and this is regional and state and perhaps even local to some extent, public schools, especially large urban public schools, are such a mess. I'm just not convinced they can be fixed.
You know, and that's, I don't know if I, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I would certainly acknowledge that there's a lot of problems with, you know, what we all call inner city schools, and there are certain places where, you know, the public education option is not particularly good. They can't keep good teachers. They're underfunded, and they're not meeting the needs of the students. I acknowledge that completely. But my position is that going with school vouchers is the one thing worse that you can do for this, because the educational outcomes are going to be worse, because you're taking even more money out of a system that's already, you know, struggling to survive. So it makes it worse for the students to remain, and for the students to get voucher money, that it's not enough for them to afford on their own a quality private school. They're almost all of them are religious, but any kind of quality private school, the tuition amount required is going to be more than what you're going to get for the voucher. So all this does is, essentially, if you're living in that area and you're already sending your kid to like one of these, you know, these top tier, you know, private schools, you're kind of getting a tax rebate for it, and everyone else gets basically a check that is not going to make ends meet in terms of education.
Right. And so, you know, I'm going to be honest with you. Philosophically, I'm on the fence. You know, but at the same time, when I think about it from a position of if I were a parent, my philosophical qualms tend to vanish a little bit. When it comes down to, can I send my kid to a pretty good private school that teaches the values I want them to learn, versus do I be a good citizen and send them down to the local public school where they're liable to get beat up? I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to probably want to send them to the private school. But I think to say that it is, the data shows it to be a failure, I don't think that's correct. I also don't know that there's any data or enough data to say that they're successful. What I think is, and let me give you an example from Texas. This just drove me crazy. There was a thing circulating a month or two ago, and I verified this wasn't made up, that showed the new cost for healthcare for teachers in Texas. So to get, basically, I think it was the middle tier, or maybe the highest tier, but it's still the differences in cost were $100 on either side. To get the middle or top tier healthcare for your family, for you, your spouse, and one child, a teacher in Texas is like $1,200 a month. Well, the minimum salary for a teacher in Texas is like $26,000. Now, most teachers make more, but there are teachers that are only going to make that. So, essentially, you could potentially pay more than half of your bring-home income just to provide health insurance. So, my position is, public schools, for a myriad of reasons, are really messed up bad. And my position is I would rather have some help sending my kid to a private school where they'll get the education I want them to get than to send them to a system that appears to be broken, maybe beyond repair.
I don't know. My mom, there's ways to excel when you go to a public school. I mean, there's like programs like Gifted and Talented and
right. Yeah, no doubt.
And, I mean, there's ways to excel. I mean, obviously, it's inner city kids because they're locational. At least in where I grew up, that's how it was. It's just a product of the neighborhood you're in.
Right. In 15 years from now, when I'm assuming we're all childbearing age, but let's assume we all had babies in January. You know, in 12, 13 years from now, when our kids are ready to go to middle school and high school, how's it going to be then? I mean, it could be, maybe we all get together, we fix it, it could be great, but I don't think that the past 2 or 3 decades has shown us that it is necessarily going to get great again.
So that's an interesting story. Go ahead, Siobhan.
I went to a private Catholic school, and I can tell you that my brother went to the medical magnet school, the public school in our hometown, and I don't think that we necessarily got disparate educations, honestly. Like, we both ended up at the same college. He has a master's in public health from UT, like, I'm a lawyer, like, we ended up in the same place. And I don't really feel like, his education was different. Quite frankly, he had some better teachers than I did, because his teachers actually got paid more than mine did. So, like, for instance, my calculus tutor was his calculus teacher. So like his calculus teacher went to public school to teach because he got paid more than he did like teaching at a private school.
Yeah, so, no doubt. I mean,
like a lot of private schools really do pay their teachers under like the public.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I know that because I work at a private institution that'll go unnamed, and also when I was growing up, I went to an elementary and middle school that was a private Catholic school in Georgetown. I went to Holy Trinity. Some people have probably heard of it, and yeah, they got paid a lot less, but it's because they love to be there or whatever. But that's such an affluent area. When I hit the public school for high school after my first year of high school, like, I got just as good an education there, but it was because that's an affluent area. They got lots of money to put into their educational system,
Well, and to give you an idea, like my hometown is one of the poorest counties in the entire country. It's like one of the top 5 poorest counties in the U.S., like including Hill County, Alabama. So, I mean, and there are 6 5A high schools in my hometown. And most of the buildings at my brother's high school were portable buildings that were only intended to be temporary, and that they ended up having to make permanent over 30 years because they couldn't afford to build new buildings. So, I mean, he didn't go to an affluent, wealthy high school. He didn't go to the poorest one in our entire hometown, but he didn't go to one that was by any means affluent at all. So, I mean, I think that comparison, to say that only wealthy high schools are worth going to is just not true.
Well, but here's
not borne out in my personal experience.
Go ahead. Just going to echo that. I had to also go to a Catholic school, and I agree, there are some that aren't expensive because you're out in these rural areas, and mine were religious, though, that I went to. It was Catholic also, because my mom wanted me to get into a Catholic high school. So you had to go to a Catholic undergrad for so many years, and she didn't want to keep me in the ghetto areas in Baton Rouge because that's where the gifted program was going to take me. So she pulled me and put me into Catholic school, so I got yanked in like 5th grade. So I saw both worlds, and then was a stupid-ass teenager, got in a lot of trouble, had to go back to public school when I was in high school, like an idiot. I mean, just... So I've seen it in all ways, and they're all bad in their own ways and good in others.
Well, and here's another thing for me. Now, this is Texas. This may not be true in other states, because I had to look this up because I was pretty sure. In Texas, private schools are not required to take standardized STAR. They call them STAR tests.
Yeah, that's right.
They don't necessarily. Private schools don't necessarily have to fall into the trap of teaching the test. Now, I realize teaching the test is probably a bit of an anecdote. I don't have any data to say that's what happens, but I think we all know teachers, students will tell you that they do spend a lot of time teaching the test. But even more than that, I guess my issue is, and this really, again, this is very personal for me, and I'm transparent about that because I don't necessarily think that my view is the only right view on this. But, the fact that schools in general, I was going to be a teacher. When I finished my first degree, political science is useless if you're not going to be a lawyer. So I was going to be a teacher, and I started a teacher certification program. I'll never forget, like, day 1 or day 2, I went in there, I wanted to teach, like, gifted, talented, I wanted to make the next generation of, like, I don't know, super political people. And I went in there, and they set us all down, and they said, look, your job is to get these kids out of high school alive. And I was like, what? And they said, yeah, your job is to simply get these people graduated. It's a numbers game. Your job is not to inspire the next generation of anything. It's not to give them any skills for life. It's simply to get them out the door to get your numbers, to make the numbers look good. And that's such an entrenched problem, and maybe not in all states, but in Texas it is. I don't know how we walk that back. I'm going to be honest with you. My preference for vouchers is not so much a preference for private school as it is I'm exacerbated by how far gone I feel like public school systems are, and I just don't see any way to walk it back.
Well, I don't think, not all public school systems are equal. Like I said, a lot of it, depends on the area. If you're in an affluent area, like the public high school that I went to was ranked, I think, one of the top 100 high schools in the country.
Sure.
Just a couple years after. But I was in Arlington, Virginia, right? I wasn't in Baton Rouge. I wasn't in some place that just really low income area. Like, and I say that living in Murray County, Tennessee, I would never want to send, if I had a kid, would want to send them to a public high school here. I get that, but go ahead.
Like, they're one of the top high schools in the country is in Mercedes, Texas. It's SciTech. I mean, but you know what it takes to get a good public school? A fuckload of money.
Yeah.
That's what it takes. I mean, you have to know where your mouth is. Like, you can educate hundreds of thousands of kids in, say, a piece of shit high schools in Brownsville, Texas, where you can put your money into a SciTech and make it, like, decent. I mean, that place, like, those kids showed up to school, like, 6 o'clock in the morning, had extremely rigorous academics. I mean, kids who would have graduated in the top 10% at my private Catholic high school weren't in the top 10% there because they had to work their butts off. I mean, they took additional computer science programs starting in their freshman year. What it takes to be a rigorous, good public school is money. Like, that's what and do that, and vouchers pull money away from public schools that need it. And they don't put it in a place that would be beneficial, and that's the problem.
It's called, I agree, it's not providing for the betterment of the whole, it's providing for the betterment of those that can, like, manage to get ahead because they have more money.
And not even that, really, like, it really just does kind of be, like David said, a tax rebate for people who already afford to put their kids, who don't already afford that, to put their kids in private school. It's a tax.
I don't know if it's so much the betterment of money. I think what it does is it provides opportunities for kids who want to achieve, but it also leaves behind others. But we're probably already doing that. I feel like the question is, I feel like the choice that we're faced with, not the what should be, but the choice that we're faced with is we continue to provide, again, I'm really talking in certain circumstances, a mediocre education to everyone, where everyone kind of gets left behind, or we provide an opportunity for those kids who really want to excel in the way they might not be able to.
Well, there's another option that's not really.
Is this like the TOPS? I get it now. Is this like TOPS kind of? TOPS is something where if you make a certain, like, high school graduation GPA, you get automatic, the state will pay for your state tuition. And everyone that's against that bitches because they say that, it takes away from providing for sharing the root of the problem for the kids that can't make the grades to get TOPS.
I'm not heard of that.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the program.
I mean, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
I think one thing though is that we're all acknowledging there's definitely problems in the public school system, that there's based on location that it is failing our children, but again, caging this in vouchers yes or vouchers no. Vouchers do not help this problem, and it is a problem, and I'm not trying to skirt away from that, but vouchers do not help this situation. And what makes it even worse is if you have a child with special needs, in particular, that by taking voucher money, and they have special ed vouchers, which almost nobody utilizes because you are essentially waiving the rights for your kid through the ADA and I think IDEA. That there are certain things that are supposed to be you're guaranteed being provided, but through a public school system. And as soon as you go private, it's willy-nilly. Like, they can take you, they can refuse to take you. They give you $6,000. The institution I work at, $6,000 will pay for about 1 month's worth of tuition out of the year. Like, so it goes nowhere near covering your needs. You're basically waiving your right to have your child's needs met. I mean, by law, whatever that kid's disability is, like, the school system has to meet it or find a way to meet it. Like, they have to. There's not an option for them to not do that. But if you take that voucher money, you're giving up all of that to whatever the whims of this private institution you're sending this money to. They could take them initially and then reject them, and then you've got some money to try and go to another school. Like, it doesn't work in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I will tell you, I'm not arguing for the devolved voucher system because, frankly, I haven't done any research on it. I'm talking about the idea that someone who pays into the public school system that doesn't feel satisfied with it, receiving money to help send their kid to a private school of their choice. Now, if I say tomorrow I have a child, and I say, yes, I want the voucher money, and they say, okay, here's your check for $50 a month, and private school costs $5,000. Well, that's stupid. I'm going to agree with you. That's absolutely stupid.
And that's a lot of what's happening. But yeah, go ahead.
So then my question becomes, and again, philosophically, I'm on the fence here. So we talk about, Siobhan said, money is the answer. Well, of course it is. So take where I'm living, Fort Worth, or Houston, or any big city. So people here in large numbers feel like the public school system is okay or not great, or they're, like a lot of people don't feel like they're getting a lot of bang for their buck. So tomorrow, Fort Worth ISD said, you know what, you all pay us $5,000 more a year in school taxes, and we're going to make the school system great. How many people are going to jump on that and trust that?
Yeah, because you have this sort of bitter ideology that you're just raising taxes, and in a lot of places that's a faux pas, just right on the surface. Raising taxes for any reason is a problem, even if it's applied to something useful. Because then they go, oh, look at you tax and spend, and the schools are failing anyway, and it's not going to help, and you get all this naysaying, and you have people like this in your legislature. You can't move forward with anything.
And in Texas, don't forget that our ad valorem taxes are how we support our schools, so it's property owners.
Property tax, that's a major driver. Absolutely.
Anything substantial in property taxes, the kid's probably not going to public school.
And the other thing too is, I'm not, and now this is where it's going to get a little controversial. Some of you may agree with me, but I've kind of had this conversation on some of the chat. I think money's part of the problem, but I'm not so sure it's just money. I think there's cultural problems too. Because yes, there are some wealthy areas where people certainly pay more money, but it's not just about the facilities or the salaries that the teachers make. I think that's certainly a big factor, maybe the majority factor, but I think there's significant cultural differences. I wish if I could rattle off a couple areas where I am, it would make sense. But you all have it. You all have inner city schools, and then you have, that wealthy white suburban school. There's more than just money there. There are major cultural differences in.
There are expectations that differ depending on your background. I would agree with that.
I had a conversation the other day, and I'll be honest with you, it was pretty controversial, and I got an answer I didn't expect out of a guy. What's his name? Brendan Baker. I think he's probably mixed race, but I made a comment to him. I said, I said, part of the thing that I can't wrap my mind around, and again, I think I've talked to y'all enough, I'm pretty plain spoken. I don't understand within the black community this embrace of this hip-hop, urban, I hate to say thug because that's just become another racial euphemism. I don't use it that way, but I don't understand why that whole sort of persona is embraced by the black community. And he came back, he said, that's not a racist statement at all. It's true. And then we proceeded to talk about why. And he laid out really, he hands down won that discussion because he laid out some really great points. But it was the first time where I've been able to say that, especially to someone that is of African American descent in some way, that we actually had an honest conversation about it. I think if we're going to talk about fixing schools, we have to talk about cultural problems. So within the white schools, for example, rampant drug use. Rich white kids are using drugs. You hear that, and it's true. I hear we have a couple of really wealthy communities around here. You hear about these rich white kids. We had a kid here a couple of years ago that 13, 14, 15 years old, got drunk, drove down the road and killed somebody. His parents had a crap ton of money, and he went in there, and literally his attorney used the defense that he was
a fucking spoiled rich white boy. That's exactly what the fucking defense was. I remember that case. He was a piece of shit.
He was a spoiled rich white kid who didn't know any better, and he got off.
What did they call it? Affluenza was the
Affluenza,
yeah. Fucking horseshit.
Yeah, so it's within each community there are cultural problems, but I think that part of what fixing schools has to do, you got to fix that somehow.
I don't think it's an inborn cultural problem. I think it's a function of poverty to have low expectations. And that you could be white, black, anything in between. It's not. I don't think it's intrinsic at all to communities of color. I think it's intrinsic to poverty. I agree. Yeah, Siobhan, you had something.
He's an educated lawyer, so like he didn't grow up on the streets. But you're right. He does have extremely thoughtful arguments about that stuff, and I think has a perspective that most of us, haven't.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been black. I'm not even close. I'm pale, pasty white.
Are you sure?
I mean, all I'm saying is that, I think it really, like David said, it's more of a socioeconomic thing. Like, a lot of the kids that I went to high school with, they were wealthy Hispanic kids. They didn't have the same kind of expectations as the kids that I worked with when I, waitressed over the summer. God, no.
Yeah.
Literally everybody else, except for me, had a child or was pregnant by the time they were 18. And that was the expectation.
Yeah.
And they told me that. They were like, even if they weren't married or dating somebody, that was the expectation.
And that has to do with socioeconomic status, because where I live in southern middle Tennessee, I'm not quite rural here. I'm on the cusp of it. But I've also been to a town called Lawrenceburg, which is about 45 minutes back in the day. Once upon a time when I was married, I was married. I'm divorced. Yeah, and it's been a while. It feels like another life. But she grew up it's a very rural town. Almost everyone was poor. You either worked at a factory or some plant or something like that, and that was pretty much the only source of upward mobility in that area. And it was very uncommon for you to not marry your high school sweetheart, to get pregnant by 22, kind of thing. And there was just a cycle of poverty, and really what I think those of us who are a little bit more educated or better employed, these would be very low expectations. And it's the same, and again, going back to what I said about wanting to send, if I had a child, a public school in this area, I would say, hell no, because the quality of education was really, really bad. It's the same. They're white kids though, because this is rural Tennessee instead of urban Texas or wherever that you happen to be. It's a function of that socioeconomic status. It's a function of poverty rather than a function of anything intrinsic to culture. I mean, I see why some people might see it that way, but it's a false attribution, I think.
Yeah, I think too, to a certain extent, I think part of this really speaks to a larger problem in this country, and that is the notion of what defines success. I grew up in one of those families where you have to go to college, you got to get a college degree opens the doors for you, and blah, blah, blah. For the most part, I don't really have a problem with that. But one of the things that really opened my eyes is several years ago, my wife used to work for the local Ronald McDonald House, and I'm not familiar with that, but it's an organization.
We can explain it for other people. Go ahead.
Most of the people on the board of the Ronald McDonald House were McDonald's franchise owners. So we got to know these people. As it turns out, although most all of them did have degrees, all of them started out working in McDonald's flipping hamburgers. And now they own McDonald's. And that's something, I think that's part of what's wrong in this country, and even with education, is we're trying to turn every kid into a, doctor, lawyer, scientist, and that's just not plausible. Not every kid is going to have to be a doctor, lawyer, scientist. And I think to say that if a kid has, hands-on mechanical skills, I can't fix a car.
Well, can I ask you this, Chris? Can I ask you this? Okay, so everyone, I know in my town, I'm sure everyone here says that in their town they have, unless the whole town is in and of itself, a bad area. And by bad area in most places, that means high crime, unsafe, low property values, or mostly rentals, slums, right? Those are going to be the places that are producing children that, in most, you'll find places, are the kids at these quote-unquote bad schools, public bad schools, okay? And so when you're young, that's like the time to beat the perpetual cycle of just loser after loser after loser, and you're going to be at a place with just kids that are all like bad, don't you think that like makes it much harder if all the kids around you come from broken homes and are just fucked up? Sorry.
I do absolutely think that context plays a role. I do think that your socio-cultural context plays a role. That's why I think that in some ways schools should really think about how even early on do we define a child's talent? You know, not every child is an intellectual person. Not every child is a mechanically inclined person. The problem is in society we place value on one and not the other as much. I mean, I think a prime example is the value we place on athletes versus teachers. And that's why I think that, you know, in lower income schools, these kids really strive for athletic performance because they feel like it's their only way out. And that does work to some extent, but, you know, there was just somebody just published something in Texas about the 10 or 15 or whatever highest paid coaches in Texas. I think the highest paid football coach in Texas makes somewhere around $160,000 a year, whereas median teacher income is probably, I don't know, 40. It should be the opposite of that, really. I'm a football fan, but I don't know. I don't have an answer. I really don't. But happy birthday, Haley. Let's see the name up there, dude.
I think she's still there she is. Hey. Yeah, Haley, we were talking about school vouchers and their efficacy, and we've gone onto all kinds of tangents on culture and race and poverty. We're kind of all over the place at this point, and that's okay. I don't mind the conversation, you know, evolving a little bit organically.
My time there, sir.
Who? Me?
Yeah, your microphone.
Oh yeah, it's the blue snowball. It's it looks fancier than it is because it's omnidirectional. It's not quite as on point as.
Is that new?
No, I've had this pretty much since we started doing the podcast. It was one of my first purchases, even before I got the laptop and the setup out here, out of my little man cave.
You've had blue ball the whole time?
Club.
But no,
I've got to be the most juvenile person.
No, it's okay. And I just want to take this brief moment because we're talking about, you know, problems in poverty and communities of color and culture and stuff. I just want to point out how awkward it is that we're just a bunch of white people here talking about problems with other cultures, and that makes me feel extraordinarily awkward and out of place. It's a conversation I would love to continue, but I think one that deserves better representation than we're genetically capable of.
Like professional level, education wise.
Which brings me.
Hey, can I jump in?
Go for it.
Who is that?
I'll turn my camera on maybe if I can figure this out. I've never used Hangouts. So
Oh my God, who's joined? I didn't even realize that someone else was on.
Yeah, she's been in there for a minute. Just quiet. Hey, what's up?
Who is Christy? Oh my God, so cool.
Yeah, I jumped on halfway through and I was like, oh, they're talking about education. So.
Yeah, we were.
Oh my God.
The original conversation was about school vouchers. Yeah.
I know, right? Yeah, I didn't know the conversation was about. I talked on my phone, but I was like, hey, you guys know I love education.
Absolutely.
But no, like, I'm obviously not a person of color, but I did actually grow up in an inner city neighborhood that was 95% African American and Hispanic. And I went to inner city schools in elementary. So I can't really represent them because I wholly admit I had full white privilege, even in that kind of school system. And then I ended up going to a magnet school for high school, different experience. So, but yeah, I have very strong opinions on vouchers, but I'm really enjoying listening right now.
Well, good deal. Yeah, and I'm.
Were you pro or against?
I'm against, but I also ran for the public school board, so it kind of comes with the territory.
So I would be curious to know, though, because my mind is a little bit amendable on this. What are some real options then? What can we do? Again, it depends on where you live. I know so much, but what really can you do to fix the school? Where they're broke. Now, some schools need to be fixed, but, where they're broke the worst, what can really be done to fix it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a multifaceted thing. So I live in Williamson County, which is one of the most affluent counties in the United States. So my opinion is a little biased because we have good schools here. But a bigger factor of why our schools are so good isn't necessarily the finances as much as it's the parental involvement. So we have fully stocked PTOs where parents are fighting over who gets to be room mom, who gets to be president of the PTO. I'm like, you guys have it.
It's a real battleground, for real. Go ahead.
But then my friend who teaches in Metro, which is a county north of us, so like Nashville proper, you know, she's like, they don't even have a PTO because they only have one parent even interested in it. And she teaches in the inner city schools. But, so, I mean, a lot of it is just the functions of the family. So I grew up in a very, you know, impoverished area. My family wasn't involved. I just got, you know, the luck of the draw with the high IQ that I made it through that kind of system. But, I mean, when it comes to fixing the problems in general, like I've always been very anti-vouchers in Williamson County. In my county, I'm seen as very anti-charters because we have a good school system. And I know the cost of it. So while we're spending about $8,000 a year educating a child, we would have to spend $10,000 to $12,000 with that student in the form of a voucher. So it's actually going to raise taxes and cost us more to send children to private schools than it would in public. Plus, you'll have less children in the public schools, and when you have less occupying the building, the cost of operations go up because you still have to pay the electric bill doesn't change just because there's 10 less kids in the school.
Yeah, and I think you really hit on something there about families, and that's another reason why I guess in some ways I probably am for vouchers. It's because at the end of the day, the real problem here is the family structure. That's really the issue. That's why I blame teachers. I'm not down on teachers. Teachers have an impossible job. But there's nothing that you can legislate that's going to fix the brokenness of families in this country. And that's another reason I guess I'm pretty skeptical. You know, there's nothing you can do to the schools, to the buildings. There's not enough money in the world to fix the brokenness of the family structure. Just not.
So I guess what you're
there's some are like there's social programs, and I'm going to use like my own my own life growing up for that. Because it's kind of a similar argument I think of like when it comes to public education or even social programs and welfare. My family wasn't the greatest, so I didn't have assistance growing up. If it wasn't for programs in the public school system, because I wouldn't have gotten a voucher, my mom wouldn't have sent me to a private school because she would have to transport me. I mean, you know, just to be completely honest, I went to 14 schools. I was in and out. So, you know, my family struggled. But there were social programs within that school that helped me because I did have some learning issues. And it helped me get a better education so that I didn't continue that cycle of poverty with my family. So I know, like, selfishly, my child, I would love to see him in a Montessori-type school, but I'm sending him to a public school. And
just to kind of piggyback off of that, yeah, we shouldn't just say, well, hey, you come from a really crappy family who isn't going to be there for you and fight over being the kind of parent who's going to be involved in all the after-school activities or sign you up for voucher programs. So guess what? You're SOL. You're going to have this level of education, and you know what? That level of society is going to continue to grow, and everything. I don't know, like, why we think it's a good idea to just leave a portion of the society who already has such a, you know, downtrodden existence by having a shitty family, by saying, well, guess what? Let's get some vouchers so that those people with those parents that care can get that really, really good education. And let's just forget about all these other kids who, you know, didn't get the luck of the draw of having a high IQ or having good parents. Because, you know, whatever, not my problem, not my kids.
That all sounds great, but that doesn't solve anything, and that's the real issue here. There are all these programs that have been tried, and we're not fixing anything.
I think we have someone here on the phone who is
talking about fixing things, yeah.
I'm not homeless. I'm educated. I have a high-paying job. I pay a lot of taxes. If it wasn't for social programs, and this was in the 1980s and 90s, if it wasn't for those programs, and I did go to a magnet high school, but that was still public. If it wasn't for those programs, I'd probably be a hooker. I mean, I'll just be straight with you. That was the environment I was raised in. Like,
there is.
I'd be on drugs.
Christy, can I ask you a question? Yeah. How much in your sort of progression in the right direction from your upbringing, like what impact, since you had to go to public schools, like what aspect of that made you like who you are? Like were the teachers in your magnet program like influential in any way?
It's hard to say, like with the magnet program with the high school, mostly because I didn't go until I was in high school, so ninth grade. I want to say the most influential was actually the early education teachers I had, and that was in public education. And it really came down to, I got a few really good teachers who recognized that I was exceptional at things like math and science, but I sucked at communicating, I still do. But then said, we need to pull her out and put her in special programs to help her, bring up a certain bar. So I'd say the more influential, honestly, was probably third and fourth grade and the teachers I had in the public school system. The magnet school was just, I don't think I would have even gotten into the magnet school if I didn't have that early intervention.
So let me ask you this, though. Obviously you're a spokesperson for the public programs that you benefited from. I don't have any issue with that. But, at the beginning of this call, maybe before you jumped on, I cited a couple studies about voucher programs that are also successful. So
I would like to see those, by the way. If you could send those to me, because I've never heard of a successful voucher program, like ever. So I would be interested in seeing that. When you get a chance on your own time.
Washington, D.C. is one of them, but
I'll judge vouchers as much as charter schools, where
the same articles that I read weren't just pro-voucher. I mean, there were cases for and cases against. My point is, David said at the top of the hangout that, there have never been successful voucher programs, and there have been programs that have been considered successful depending on how you gauge success. But my point is this. So you benefited from these programs and have obviously done well, and by the way, you're a great communicator. How many kids didn't? I mean, at what point, how many social programs do we throw out there? I'm not saying we should pull any out. I'm not saying we should do away with social programs or anything like that. I'm in favor of expanding them. But my point is, there have been social programs in schools for decades, and our society education clearly isn't going on an upward tick here. So,
I think it is, though. I really do think education, compared to 20 years ago, it's better. Of course, I'm comparing when I went to school compared to my child going to school in Williamson County, in all fairness. But, if you look at, the overall SAT score nationally, those are the amount of students going into college. Of course, millennials all have to go. But if you look at just high school graduation rates, the amount of kids going and getting college degrees, that has all increased.
But are those really good measures of how we're educating? That's my thing is, how many kids are graduating and how many kids are going off to college? Even kids that are graduating.
Economic class.
Do what?
They look per socioeconomic class, that's the whole point. Right? Isn't that how you can tell? In a community, if things are going well, you don't just look at how the total amount of kids that are doing well, because that's not going to be even. That's not going to be fair.
Right? Yeah, you'd have to do that.
A wide net. It depends who you ask, because you are going to interpret that differently. I'm going to look at it and say, well, are the people that have special needs taken care of? Are they
I agree.
All around? I mean, I believe that being exposed to difference makes us better.
No, I agree. I think that I think the perception, though, is, I think there's maybe a poor perception of, well, let me rephrase that. Probably what the boss wants to do with vouchers is probably not the same thing I want to do with vouchers. I don't necessarily like this woman. So probably what the boss wants to do with vouchers would benefit a bunch of almost wealthy white people and almost wealthy other people who just can't quite afford to send their kids to private school. That's probably fair. I'm not going to argue that. And that's why I said at the beginning, I'm really kind of on the fence with this philosophically, because pulling, 10 more kids out of public schools who could almost afford to go to private school, you're right, that doesn't help. I mean, it helps those 10 kids maybe, but it doesn't necessarily help a lot of people. I
Well, I think you're hitting on something right there. Betsy DeVos is the head of public school systems. Her job duty is to improve public school systems, and she is supportive of vouchers to go to private schools. And she is not implementing policies that actually improve public schools. And her focus is, and she actually takes this criticism, she loves this, because her focus is on individual stories, individual students who somehow managed by mentors or something to get out of the public school system and go into private schools or charter schools or etc. But her entire platform goes against the objective of her job, which is to improve public schools. She is advocating for school choice in a way that takes away from assets and funds and energy that could go towards improving public schools, which, we can all talk about anecdotes about individuals, and you can mention how many people aren't being improved, in the same way that Christy is, but at the end of the day, we want more people overall. We don't want to focus on the individual. We want public schools that everyone in this country has access to as a right to have a decent shot, by that education that they receive.
Yeah, and every time there's a voucher program instituted, it takes away from those that remain in the public school system.
Exactly.
And it becomes a negative feedback loop, essentially, that you take money out, then things get worse in the public school, and you take money out and things get worse in the public school, and you can't justify the budget, because most places are not going to raise taxes in order to pay for a voucher program. So what happens is this money is coming out of what would have been allocated for those public school systems. So a bad situation becomes worse every time. And the students either didn't really need the help in the first place because they were already going to a private school that their parents were paying some premium for, or they can't afford it, or they throw their money at some cheap fly-by-night pop-up.
Or it's just focusing on individual people. It's not focusing on actually helping a group, a generation,
Absolutely.
get an education.
It leaves it leaves kids worse off overall. And Chris, I get what you're saying about problems, with the public school system and how certain areas that they're definitely they're not succeeding and they're not serving our kids' needs. But again, my original statement is going with vouchers is the one, as bad as the situation, that's the one worst thing you can do is by institute a voucher program. And it's sold emotionally that, we're going to leave these kids behind. Don't they deserve a better educational choice? They're not actually getting an educational choice at all. Their situation just being made worse, where religious schools are benefiting and people who can already afford to send their kids to private schools, which are almost all religious, we're helping them out at the expense, again, of poor people. And that's to me why it's devastating, outside of the constitutionality of it.
The other thing that I think it's important to say is what works in one area may not work in another. That is also part of the problem, is that, we're trying to enact rules nationwide, and this country is so diverse. I mean, what works for one state may not work in another.
I'm sorry, but real quickly, you're right. States' rights are important. States should choose their own thing as long as states aren't going to act based upon, I think, strong religious animus or strong any type of discriminatory animus, really, against someone's personal liberty and rights, which usually is motivated by religion, pretty much every time.
Yeah, I agree with that. But Chris, did you have any other thoughts on that?
Did you say Chris or?
I did say Chris, but if you want to chime in, that's cool too.
Okay. No, I was going to say I actually agree, that these kind of decisions really do need to be made at a state-based level. I don't think there needs to be a national policy on no vouchers or yes vouchers. Every state has to accept them. But there does need to be some, I would agree with some national restrictions on vouchers cannot go to religious schools. Vouchers cannot go to, but I think each state should be able to decide whether or not they're going to implement it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of those cases have been lost in favor of voucher money going to religious schools, which I always look at it, that's a violation of my freedom of conscience. If I'm paying tax dollars, I don't want that money to go to promote religious education, because that includes teaching, some sort of sectarian, set of beliefs, some sort of sectarian worldview. I don't want my money going that way. That's a violation of my religious freedom. But again, didn't go that way because we have originals. Originals.
I just sent you an article. It's an NPR article, but it kind of sums up what I found, and it's a mixed bag. But there is some, there's some stuff in there about positive effects of vouchers and negative effects of vouchers, and I guess it depends on your perspective.
I'm sure plenty. Listen, I think that vouchers are a great idea for a lot of kids. I think that, if your product is to make it better for kids, then I think that vouchers in a lot of places would do that. But I think that at the same time, you're going to leave a significant percentage of children behind, and you're going to corrupt, I think, the public school system. My mom's been a public school teacher my entire life, and she's even against vouchers, and she's still voted Republican.
Right. Well, I think this article I sent David talks about
and I'm not going to sit here and read it while we're on air, but I appreciate you sending it to me.
But it talks about skimming the cream off the top, and the data doesn't necessarily support that. I think that would be the logical conclusion. I think the problem is if you take the religious argument out of it, because I think that's valid. But I think the problem is there's not a lot of really good data. I think what data there is mixed. So I don't have any answers. I'm thinking more in terms of what I want to do with my child that hopefully is going to come home soon. Not so much about what I want to do to make America great again. And,
triggered.
I mean, I'm just going to be real honest with you. The public schools that are close to me are not even close to what you would consider that bad.
Yeah, and that's the brass tacks of it. When it comes to your kid, you're going to want to do right by them and give them the best shot that they can have, right? And that's why vouchers sell, because you're approaching these parents who want to give their kids the best shot. The problem is, and again, I can look at the thing you sent me, that it's my understanding that really in any place where voucher systems have been present for any number of years, and you look at the data, you look at the achievement scores, you look at the educational outcomes, they either break even or they're worse. And it has a lot to do with which particular schools are being sent to. Now, of course, you have your Ivy League equivalents. I actually went to one when I was a child. That was a private school. Would my parents have benefited in terms of a tax break for what they could have afforded to send me to anyway? Yes, that's a win-win for them if you're looking about your money and your kids and what you need for you. But that doesn't help. That doesn't serve a population. And I think that's sort of been what's been echoed around.
The reasons why vouchers are always going to be this sort of good selling point is because their narrative is the story of the individual. You want to do right by your individual kid, by your individual family, and that's something that everyone can hear and everyone as a parent, wants to do. Whereas it goes against the inherent position of trying to make this generation of students, this generation of Americans, better, more educated people through the public school education system, which everyone has access to. It doesn't, everyone can go to it. But it targets in on the parent wanting to provide, whatever is best for the child, and by doing so, it just slowly starts destroying this network system that we've created that is to educate every single person in America if they want education.
I would counter that, though, by saying that if every parent had the ability to do what was best for their children, maybe we would accomplish the same ends in a more efficient way. That's sort of the story of America, right? The individual achievement versus the collective. I mean, that's the whole sort of notion of the invisible hand of economics.
What I'm talking about is why this is a selling point. We all recognize that there's crappy parents out there. What is your point?
I was saying, not every parent wants to do what's best by their children.
I'm saying this is why vouchers are persuasive.
Right, but are you saying that from a critical perspective, or are you just making a mistake?
I'm saying you're the one who brought up you want what's best for your child, your future child, and I'm saying that's exactly the type of mentality that vouchers tap into.
And
this is where it is hurting.
And is that wrong?
I mean, I think that it's undermining a system that educates every single person in America.
It's not wrong to want what's best for your children.
No.
But as a society, when we're looking at vouchers, I have to take my selfishness as a parent away, because I want what's best for my son. But I also have to think about these other children. It's prudent for me to want what's best for them as well, because my son's going to have to work with them when he grows up. You know, I would rather see, like, you're not to get rid of the lower class in poverty, because then more people are contributing. So it would be more beneficial in the long run for my child if everyone got a good education versus just him getting a superior and everybody else getting like a kind of crap one.
But I guess my question is, how realistic is that? How realistic is it that, you know, starting tomorrow, everyone's going to benefit? I mean, we've had public, you know, the NEA came in.
I mean, there's a lack of political will there, I think. I mean, I think it's what we should do. If we all really care about the future of our kids, you know, and not just our kids, but every kid in America, you know, if we, you know, that, I know that sounds like, you know, woogity boogity socialism, but, you know, if we really, you know, had more focus on that, we could turn our attention, we could turn our finances to that, we could turn the way we allocate tax dollars to focus more on better education for everybody. We could do that if we wanted to, but there's just no way. In you know, the culture of partisanship that we live in.
We don't have a society that values education enough to spend the money on it that needs to. Like in my county, in order to fund education, like we asked for a tax increase this year. We have some of the lowest property taxes in the state of Tennessee, even though we're one of the wealthiest counties in America. It would have cost the average homeowner, so I'm talking the average, so there's people like me and then there's people with $1 million homes. The average person, $8 a year, and people had a conniption. I'm like, that's 2 Starbucks coffees, and most of these, like, very affluent Williamson County women are buying 2 Starbucks coffees a day. And I'm like, that would have adequately funded everything we needed for education this year, and really, we're addressing even just growth issues. Building the buildings and having the chairs for the students to sit in. Is our biggest issue here, but we couldn't even get people to get behind a tax increase to even adequately fund the schools and pay the teachers. So if we can't do that here, that's the problem. As a society, we have to get people to be willing to fund education the way that they want to fund stupid stuff like a border wall. Like, the amount of money going to something like that could solve a lot of our education issues, because we could pay teachers reasonably. We could provide good environments, but I don't think as Americans in general, society, we care enough about education to fix the problem. And I think part of that is, you know, we need to address it more. We need to be more vocal and, you know, advocates of it. But again, that doesn't fix the individual issue of my kid's in school now, and I want to make sure he's getting the best education today. That issue at all, but.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's probably time that we move on. I think we've we've only we skimmed a little bit on vouchers, and we got into, I think, really, you know, some of the deeper issues of, you know, the problems in education, why the notion of vouchers exists in the first place. But let's move on from that, because we're gonna have some real fun now, Chris, because you get to talk to a bunch of women about reproductive rights. To say what now? I'm sorry.
I said, let's move on to the next pony in the stockade, because we beat that horse.
Yeah, that horse is dead. This one's about to get, just turned into, you know, ground meat.
So it's been nice talking to all of you, because I'm about to get clobbered.
we're gonna try and be gentle here moving forward, and we're
glad that Bob and Haley are both here, or I'd probably go crying.
What's the topic?
We're going to talk about essentially abortion rights and personhood is the conversation that I wanted to have with you.
I'm muting my phone. Y'all have fun with that.
You're bowing out of this one. You can be a fly on the wall if you're not trying to jump in. The way I look at it is like my basic setup is this. My own personal stance on abortion is that. No, I do not acknowledge personhood at the moment of conception. I don't acknowledge personhood at any point prior to cognitive development and self-awareness of a fetus, okay? And that tends to hit around the same point of viability outside the womb. And so nobody likes abortion. Nobody likes the idea, let's have an abortion. I just got pregnant. I'm going to use that as a method of birth control. This is ridiculous and hyperbolic and silly. No, there's no woman I know that is that flippant about anything. So serious, you know. But when it comes to individual rights, when it comes to bodily autonomy, I think it's important to recognize that women get a say over that. And where I draw the line, personally, again, being a dude and not trying to mansplain this, because I'm going to get my ass handed to me if I do, that, you know, I delineate at personhood, the law delineates at viability. To me, they strike pretty close. Advent of technology, viability may occur prior to personhood. But I don't, and this is falling. If you guys are not a member of the group, you may not follow all of what I'm saying here. But I guess to rewind just a little bit, Chris, it was his position, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you acknowledge personhood sort of at the moment of conception. I don't see that as a physical possibility, and that's I think one place we're going to have a disagreement. So go ahead, Chris.
Let me articulate my position.
Yes, please.
My position is this. Neither science nor medicine knows when life begins. That's never ever been established in any court case or by any doctor or by any scientist. There's plenty of rhetoric. You know, the latest thing going around is that when an egg and a sperm unite, there's a zinc spark. That's a chemical reaction. So the pro-life people have jumped on that and said that's evidence of life. That's incorrect. That's simply a chemical reaction. What we do know is that by the 6th week, there's a heartbeat, and by the 9th week, the fetus is capable of purposeful movement because the neural system has developed. So we don't have to say when life begins or doesn't begin.
Are you a vegetarian?
That's a little bit of a red herring. Let me finish.
I'm just saying the whole purposeful movement. My cat can move purposefully. I was wondering.
Let me finish what I'm saying.
Okay.
So we don't know when human life really began. I would submit it probably doesn't begin with a zinc spark, but it does begin well before viability, which now the earliest viability for a fetus is 22 weeks. Somewhere between 6 weeks when there's a heartbeat and 22 weeks, I would think you could probably make a pretty strong argument that fetus is alive. Currently in the state of Texas, and I'm guessing most states, I don't know if it's nationwide, you can have an abortion up to basically the end of your third trimester. So
that's not true in Texas. Just
okay, when is it?
24.
Well, that's even worse.
After 24 weeks, you need to have a medical necessity or some other reason.
Right. So that's even worse. But you can have an abortion up to and well beyond the viability of an. So to say I don't acknowledge personhood, there's no real basis for that.
Well, I guess.
How many? Go ahead, Chris. Well, I want to be respectful of your position here.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry.
The point is this: we don't know. Hang on, let me finish. I'm going to be real quick.
Clarification to what you just said, though. How do you define personhood?
No. Viability is my question. How did you come up with that number? I'm just curious. Number 4.
22.
Because I'm a neonatal nurse, and we take care of 22 weeks, and that's the lowest threshold of viability for an infant currently. Most places, depending on the level of NICU, is 23 to 24. But in the highest level NICUs, like where I work, 22 weeks. You're
defining viability based on whether or not you can keep this infant alive with
a preemie delivery. I get you.
So we're not talking about like viability as far as like no medical support keeping it alive afterwards, right?
No, that's well into the 30s. No, I'm talking about what we consider in the medical field to be viable, and that's 22 weeks. And that's on the very, very, very early threshold. Most of those kids don't do well. So I'm going to summarize.
By most, you mean like 90% and less?
What was your question again?
What do you mean, like by most? Do you mean like what percentage?
I don't know what the percentile is on 22-weekers, to be honest with you, because 22-week viability is fairly new. We were at 23 weeks just recently within the past few years, and we started.
Okay, what percentage within like 24 weeks and down?
Survive or do well?
Survive. We were talking about viability. We're talking about surviving.
Yeah, I think my experience, a good number of 23 and 24 weekers survive. The numbers that survive without any sort of ongoing problems is fairly low, just because their systems are so poorly
developed. What does that mean?
Like underdeveloped lungs and
yeah, so the ones that don't have personal chronic.
No, essentially like ventilators for the rest of their lives because
numbers.
Well, I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I don't know.
But I think your point is though, 22 weeks is the extreme end of the range. But go ahead, continue, please.
My point was, we don't know when life begins, and because we don't know when life begins, my position is to err on the side of life beginning sooner than later. And if life begins at conception or within the first 6 weeks or 8 weeks or what have you, I just don't see how elective abortion as a means of birth control is a viable option given the choice argument, any more than you would argue that someone has the choice to cut off their own arm or use methamphetamine or do anything else that we don't allow.
Okay, can I ask, because I need more clarity on this. When you're talking about when life begins, what exactly do you mean by life? Could you define for me essentially what you mean by life beginning? Because, something that's, living organic tissue is alive, if we want to be, hyper technical about it. That doesn't mean it's, a human being, right? Because a tumor has human DNA. No one thinks that's a person. No one thinks that's a human being, right? And I'm saying that because it's something non-controversial that we can agree on. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic or draw a comparison between a fetus and a tumor. I'm trying to draw a contrast, actually. So when you say something is alive or is a human life, what exactly do you mean?
So I guess, I guess you would have, I don't know how life is defined necessarily, and I don't know that there's a singular definition of life, but to me, some sort of being that has a heartbeat, that has spontaneous movement, is alive, whether it's a cat or a human, for that matter. Something that's capable of function is alive. I think, my guess is that you would make an argument that life has to have something more cognitively developed, but I think that
definitely the argument. That's exact 100% the argument. And when it comes to something that's cognitively developed, i.e. a woman, and something that's not cognitively developed, i.e. an unborn fetus, why should we give the precedent to the unborn fetus?
Because the unborn fetus will develop, and the unborn fetus doesn't have a choice of saying that.
Yeah, but when you say that, you're prioritizing this future development of the fetus over, the health and well-being of a woman who is already born and cognitively developed. Like, that's really the problem here.
My position is, I don't prioritize the health of the woman, because my position is that medically necessary termination should be legal. As far as well-being goes, my position only applies to elective abortion, not labor-intensive and not medically necessary. And that's probably a discussion for another time, because I realize that it's inconsistent and paradoxical and all those things, but that nevertheless is my position. So
and that's because we don't have an understanding of when a person becomes a person, and so we should force women to not be in control of their own bodies ever during the entire 9-month time, because we don't know the answer to when a person becomes a person.
That seems pretty reasonable. Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable to me. That we shouldn't end a life because we don't know when life is.
But the thing is, we don't know when life begins. So because we don't know this, no matter what, at no point in time should you be able to make a decision to not be pregnant anymore. Because we don't know when life begins.
Right, and given that we don't know, we should err on the side of life, not err on the side of...
So given that we don't know, we should err on the side of not having a woman make her own decisions in her own life that's fully formed, been living for a damn long time enough to get pregnant, to, err on the side of maybe there's life going on here and she can't...
Chris, can you remember what's the youngest you can remember yourself?
Probably 4 or 5 years old now.
I'm resisting. I don't want us all to pile on Chris here, but if I can state, I guess, my position when we're talking about life and when life begins, and by life I'm interpreting what you mean as in like a human being, and no one is considered a person that does not have some sense of self or some subjective, experience, some form of cognition, and that's brain dependent. You cannot have cognition without a brain. If you don't have some level of cognition, hang on, let me finish. Some level of cognition as a product of the development of the brain, you can't have a subjective experience. You can't be a person. It is an organism that is alive, that is genetically human, but it's not a person. It doesn't have what I think you're calling life, as far as I understand it, because it seems like the term's used a little mushily, because it's a little bit vague the way you're applying the term life. I'm going with personhood. If you object to that, please let me know. But if it's not a person, how can you give it rights?
For example, fetuses may still tank, and so if fetuses still tank, they are aware.
Right, but at what stage is that? At what stage in development? Because that requires some level of brainstem development at the very least to be reactionary to physical stimuli, and to have a subjective experience of pain. There has to be some level of cognition. So we're still talking about the 22 to 24 week period. We're still right in that same zone because there's no mind before that point.
Right, but by what standard are we defining life as simply being self-aware?
But I thought that this was your issue. You're the one who says we don't know when life is, and Dave just pointed out that he equates being a human being with having something of a brain, rather than just reacting to pain. A cat can react to pain too. I mean, and being self-aware, he's not trying to say having memories, he's saying being human, having a formulated brain enough to be a human, and, feeling pain, being able to move, a lot of things can do that.
It doesn't require a brain. I mean, it's like cut a snake's head off and they still react to touch.
Yeah.
So we know that neurodevelopment occurs well before 24 weeks. All right, so let's talk about Texas. I didn't realize the portions of that. But neurodevelopment occurs well before 24 weeks. I don't mean from breeding.
I mean, what do you mean by neurodevelopment? The brain is still heavily developing in the 30 weeks. I mean, we don't really have eyes until the late end of the time. What are you talking about?
I mean, a 24-week infant is a human being. They can cry, they can breathe, they can eat, they can do all of those. They can eat.
Yeah, and it's not legal to abort them pretty much anywhere, unless it's a medical necessity.
Right, so 22 or 23 weeks, too. I'm talking about that same time frame. So my point is, and I think this conversation proves, we don't have a clue or a grasp on when life begins or what life even is. So,
no, but if I object to that, because if you're defining life as an subjective human experience, if you're talking about someone who's a person who is due rights, we know it's not physically possible without significant, cognitive capacities as a result of brain development. If there's no brain, there's no mind. If there's no mind, there's no person. So when you're talking about the moment of conception, particularly, because this was a conversation, if guys are not part of the group, it was a question I had sort of posed to you and it got lost in the thread, that, you know, without a brain, you cannot have a mind. And without a mind, you cannot be a person. So at the moment of conception, it's not possible for there to be personhood there. So we can say that it's a little bit, you know, hard to pin down exactly, but we know it's not there. We know it's not the moment of conception.
Strip rights away from the Terry Schiavos of the world because their brain's not working either?
I don't know who Terry Schiavo is.
Terry Schiavo took a bunch of diet pills and apparently, I think she had a stroke and was on life support. It's not that her brain wasn't working, it was that she was essentially brain dead.
There's a different...
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
So, yeah, like that's actually what they did rule, is because her husband took her off life support and she died. So, like, I mean, it's
I think I remember that now. Yeah, if you're brain dead, yeah, you're not a person anymore. Not brain damaged, not coma, brain dead, vegetative. Yes, you're not a person. You are a meat popsicle, and you're not a person anymore.
All right, fair enough. So then,
I'm sorry, Lace is trying to get in here. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lace.
Yeah, listen, I have to say real quick. First of all, David, you have like eloquently said all of my strongest like pro-choice beliefs on it. You fucking freaking killed it. I just have to say. But then like separately, Chris, I understand that you have a unique situation, like other people I've met in my life that make them really cherish life, and it makes them feel very strongly about like why abortion should be wrong. And so I get that you have a very like strong, you know, soulful pull in the direction of being pro-life. But at the same time, I think that also, you know, I side on, you know, David and Siobhan's, you know, what they're saying right now about how it's, you know, well, exactly what you were just saying. But
did you lose it?
Right. Cut this. Y'all don't have to cut this out because it's so bad. You have to cut this out, David. But
I can't cut this out. It's okay. It's all right. I have those moments too. Chris, you wanted to say something?
No, I feel like you could have just said, yeah, what David said.
I'll click back to it in a second. I just lost my train of thought.
No, but I do think that Lacey brought up a good point. I mean, you know, you're about to adopt a child in November, and
compromise. That's what it was. Shit, sorry.
There you go.
I knew I'd remember it.
Do you want to finish then?
Do you mind? Hey.
No, go.
Birthday girl, I'm gonna prop you up to spike it. So like, here's what's up. I think that. So I acknowledge that you're going through a hard time. So here's my compromise, okay? If y'all are going to say that abortion should be outlawed, I think then we should make it ridiculously difficult to the point of where like 0.01% of women would wind up pregnant, because that's how we educate them about sexual health and sexual awareness. We provide them with contraception. We make it easy. As soon as a girl is 16, if she wants to get on whatever fucking contraception she wants to get on, she can get on it. We educate them about STDs. We educate them about having babies, all this stuff, and we make it to where it's, if they want to be, government pays for it. It's free. Everyone gets it. Every single woman.
I mean, that's what it's like in Sweden, and they have almost no abortions.
What a coincidence!
Why would you assume I oppose that? Because I don't.
I don't think that you do. I'm just saying that
I'm not a Puritan here. I would much rather see birth control and sex education. And the other thing, too, that I would like to see, somebody brought up in the conversation, although it got a little skewed towards kind of deep, I would like to see fathers be held far more accountable than they are. Now, you know, here's my beef with the pro-choice argument. I don't like the argument about it's a woman's choice, all right? Because you don't have the choice to do a lot of things. You don't have the choice to cut your arm off or to use methamphetamine.
That's bullshit.
Yes, you can.
You might be committed to a psych ward, but I can
cut it off. You suffer the consequences of it, but you
don't think about it. So,
I mean, I really don't know if any doctor would cut a person's arm off for no reason.
No, like, but
I can stop off.
They
you don't have the choice to do anything and everything you want.
You know, I mean, whatever. Like,
the other thing that really bothers me is that, and I've heard this from some comments from some of you guys, is the assumption that this is nothing, and I'm not going to argue that there's some of this, but the assumption this is nothing but men wanting to control women. I have no interest in controlling any of you or my wife. To be honest with you, I couldn't control any of you if you wanted to. I would be able to hang in a conversation with any of y'all, let alone control you.
Not like you, Chris, but that's not true of the overarching majority. I mean, there's a reason why this kind of shit gets passed on a regular basis. I mean, it's not, you know, just that's not the a motivating factor for the people who pass these laws.
But I think in some cases that's true.
Politics that we argue against all the time.
I don't really know how you can credibly say that anti-choice, anti-contraception, legislation like that in general is not intended to kind of keep women in their place. Like, I don't think there's a credible argument that says that's not a motivating factor. I mean, because it is.
Sports religious.
Hang on a second. If I can defend Chris, let me defend Chris briefly here. I don't think any of his motivations or his intentions are to have the effect or to control women. I think a part of the problem is that there is certainly a faction out there that see women as being lucid and moral and more in need of regulation. I don't think that represents Chris very well, or his opinions. Based on it seems to me that Chris, your perspective is on preserving life and saving lives, and that's how you genuinely see it. And I think more people than maybe some of you realize do take that tack, because I've talked with extremely right-wing fundamentalist Christians, and they don't talk about controlling women. They don't believe that they're controlling. This policy has the effect of controlling women, but I don't think it's their intention necessarily.
Exactly, and I think that what gets misunderstood is the use of the word choice, because we discussed vouchers earlier on in this conversation. We are acknowledging right now that our public school education is broken. There is a lack of an access to sexual education and into women's health and into all the dynamics that go into reproduction. And an aspect of a woman's choice is a 15-year-old getting knocked up and deciding not to have that child so she can pursue her education.
Exactly.
And whenever we talk about not understanding incredible, to keep women in their place, I will say I think that is a little bit far. I think that what it really comes down to, though, is we have a person here who, in all likeliness, probably doesn't have the requisite understanding, to understand where babies come from, and they're put in a certain position. And I don't think that we should tell them that they can't make a different decision. I don't think that we are in a position to tell every single young woman out there that she has to have this child. I think that it's her body, and I think that we're talking about when it's personhood and when it's wrong, but I also think that at a fundamental level, we don't have the education going on in this country to really be truly critical of these choices that they're making, to actually have these women in this position. So, I think that if we're, maybe we're putting the cart before the horse whenever we're having this conversation about personhood and whatnot, but I don't think that certain people know what happens when you have sex, and then they get pregnant, and they're probably not going to be good parents. But whatever.
Exactly. No, I agree. I think.
Haley, you just hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, I think you present it well.
So are you saying basically that because of the circumstances surrounding the conception, it would be better if a child not born?
What I'm saying is, I would like for abortions to not exist anymore. But in order for that to happen, we need to actually make a concerted effort to care about our society, to educate everyone, to have, I mean, we have hundreds of thousands of kids in America who are up for adoption right now. You know, I mean, we need to be in abortion exists because of other circumstances that have nothing to do with when a person becomes a person, you know, and all those other conversations that we're having right now. And I think it's disingenuous for us to start putting on this sort of scientific morality argument about when a person becomes a person, whenever we haven't actually, as a society, done anything to truly help people who are at risk of getting pregnant at a young time. Because they're already a part of our society. We need to care about them. Why aren't we educating them? Why aren't we making sexual education and contraceptions more readily available? As I said earlier, Sweden has one of the lowest abortion rates in the world. They have a very, very good sexual education program that starts in kindergarten. And, you know, I think that if you actually want abortions to not exist, it doesn't start with trying to push forth this idea of personhood. It starts with, let's talk about sex.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. And that's one thing I think it gets easily lost in these conversations about pro-choice versus pro-life. Nobody thinks abortion is fun or flippant or easy. Like, I can only imagine it's the hardest thing a woman has to, one of the hardest things a woman will ever have to decide in her life is determining a pregnancy. You know, either because, you know, she, like you talk about, like, you know, the teenage girl that's pregnant, you're basically, if she has that kid, she's locked into a cycle of poverty for the rest of her life. You know, whatever the case may be, this is a bad situation. I'm always a proponent of, let's not get pregnant in the first place. I've lived that way personally, and have been very careful. Not everyone is so lucky. Not every. I've never gotten a woman pregnant in my life. And that's not an accident. You know, and that's not luck.
Congratulations, David.
Woo! Weird. But that being neither here nor there, yeah. And this is what's, and again, this isn't an attack on you or an argument against you at all, Chris. But a lot of times what we hear from the right is, you know, we see the finger wagging and talks, and the sanctimonious talks of personal responsibility, you know, and she should have closed her legs and all this other mess. It does nothing to solve the problem. That you need comprehensive sex education, you need access to good, effective contraception, and then we'll see the number of unwanted pregnancies and abortions go down. And in any area where these systems are in place, you see that. But then you see places where it's, you know, they're teaching abstinence only, you know, and it's this puritanical, you know, bullshit ideology. It's completely counterproductive. And the problem is that
here's my problem. I don't disagree with anything that Haley said. I've said this conservatives have is they only care about life until it's full.
Right.
I've admitted that before, and I don't know if I'm admitting that. But here's the reason that I think that I'm probably more staunchly pro-life than I am conservative, is because we've identified why unwanted pregnancies occur. We agree on what steps need to be taken to fix it. Other people don't agree, so we argue, right? We argue. We've been arguing about this for decades. In the meantime, millions of lives have been snuffed out while we argue.
The thing is, I actually don't think that we agree on what steps need to be taken. You were on the fence about vouchers. I think I mean, you know, whenever you're against something like public education, without having it being actually comprehensive, I'm not sure if we're on the same page. So that's why I think these fights are going to continue. Because we as a society care more about the individual than we do about society as a whole.
I sort of think you're conflating two different problems here. I don't have any issue with sex education or birth control. I think we could have a discussion about where I think that parents probably should be.
You're cutting out on us, Chris. Could you repeat that last part?
Hear me?
Try it again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I said, I don't know. I think that you're conflating issues here. I said, I don't know that sex education necessarily has to be the strict purview of the school system. but someone, parents or school, should be providing sex education, and I think birth control should be available.
But the thing is, whenever you say "or," we all recognize that not everyone is going to have good parents. So I think that if for this conversation to stop, we need to not have it school or parents. It needs to be school, society. Because we rely on
biology. Come on.
But so that, this begs the question, though, Nancy. This is, at what point, when are we going to stop absolving people and parents of their responsibility? So
we're not going to actually care about society and the people.
We're not going to. Wait. You should be asked why. When are we going to stop making the kids pay the consequences of their parents' mistakes?
Exactly. I mean, yeah. Once again about Sweden, one of the best public education schools in the system. Very innovative society. Everyone knows about it. Only 10 million people live there. They've invented a lot. Why? Because they care about educating the people. It's not about, throw around socialism or whatever, but yes, people freaking vote there. It's a democracy. But they care about society as a whole, about everyone being educated, about everyone having opportunities. And, I just think that, there was the American dream here for a while, but we've gotten way too focused on the individual to where we now are condemning, a 15-year-old girl with crappy parents and a minimum education and telling her she can't have an abortion for morality purposes while not even looking at ourselves for why she's in the position that she's in. And I think that we have some claim.
Preach, girl, preach!
Sorry, just saying.
Real. What she said. Boom, done.
Thank you, Lace. Yes, thank you.
I'm done.
Chris, I think really ultimately we all want the same things, and we have a difference on sort of what happens when when the hard call needs to be made. But we all want no one to be in a situation where they're wanting or needing to have an abortion. Like nobody likes that. Nobody thinks it's cool. Like there's no Oprah, you get an abortion, you get an abortion. Like nobody fucking wants that, right? Right, yeah.
I think you're probably right to the extent that we all want the same thing. I don't think we disagree maybe as much as Haley thinks we disagree. Now, I will tell you that she brought up Sweden a few times, and by most objective measures, Sweden is considered a fairly socialist country.
Okay.
Absolutely. Certain things about Sweden, like their healthcare, for example. I think they have a terrific healthcare system. I think also, and no, not Switzerland, when we speak about gun control, but I think the problem is to assume what would work in Sweden, even if it's good, even if it should work, to assume what would work in a Scandinavian country would work here is false.
I think you totally missed my point, man. I don't want abortions to happen. What I'm saying is that we need to not judge a 15-year-old girl with no sexual education and crappy parents being in a position where she needs an abortion. We as a society bear some of that blame because we as a society have done nothing for her. We haven't educated her, we haven't given her the proper avenues.
And in fact, in a lot of places, we've outlawed sex education, like in freaking Texas.
So I really don't appreciate it.
This is absurd, yeah.
And can I build on this? Can I build on what Haley was saying?
Just real quick, I don't appreciate you saying that you think that we disagree because I think we're on the same page. I don't think, I don't like that abortions exist. I wish that they didn't, but I'm not on the position that they should be gone because we haven't fixed the other problems that require them to exist.
They're also an important part of comprehensive birth control because, like it or not, you're always going to need abortions at some point, whether elective or not.
Abortions.
So, sorry, I just wanted to have that said because I did not appreciate that.
Okay, I mean,
the 15-year-old person who's not educated and finds herself in need of having an abortion.
There's a funny case of it. If I can tangent just slightly. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of. Probably have because you're pretty well known.
I'm a 15-year-old. I'm gonna. You don't in any way, shape, or form think parents should be involved in that decision.
parents
what if she doesn't have any?
Should her parents be involved in whether or not
she consent to a medical procedure under the law? So of course her parents have to be involved. She's 15.
Well, there are plenty of people that don't want parents to be involved or made aware.
Look, the problem is that a lot of times the parents are part of the fucking problem, and they would.
I mean, imagine being a 15-year-old girl just for a minute and being pregnant.
What's the point?
Isn't that? I mean, that's the most terrifying position to be in life. That you're trying to just get started in the world and just figuring yourself out.
No, thank you. That was what I was going to say. Thank you, David. Listen, this is what I was going to say. Fucking right, David. Damages. Okay, like, what is the whole point? Like, if you deny a young woman like that because society has failed her abortion, what does she miss out on? A proper high school education? Well, hopefully not that, but perhaps finishing her high school education.
Probably, actually, yeah.
A proper college education, the shot to really be able to build a career at a young age if she's perhaps not educated enough to really,
I mean, honestly, it damages us more because she's probably not going to be in a position to be a contributing member of this society.
Right.
You know, she's going to have to be someone that we support with our own tax dollars.
Which we hate, and Chris, you agreed about the right being, unfortunately predominantly pro-fetus, and they care all the way up to the point of birth, and then it's, F you freeloader. Stop milking the system, you lazy person. But this is exactly the problem they create themselves. And you're not part of that, and I'm not trying to label you with that. But that's the real problem we face is that paradox.
Just to address something real quick, I understand, you're in the process of going through adoption. I'm adopted. I know the process and everything, and there are certain sensitivities that arise that I'm aware of, but I'm also, I can't help but be passionate about, not wanting to judge people for the decisions they make, and also, wanting to have a better society. And I don't think that the conversation with abortion starts with anything that involves, after getting pregnant and then talking about the existence of personhood. I just think we as a society have failed a group of people and are continuing to fail a group of people by having this be such a hot-button, morality-based issue. And I understand that it's sensitive and everything, especially, whenever you're going through an adoption process. But, still, I can't wash my hands of the sort of blame that I have for why it exists and is prevalent here, because we don't actually make the effort to educate our children or to provide the necessary services to even prevent, to be even moderately prophylactic, to prevent this kind of situation that we find ourselves in, to where we have this hot button issue.
Well, Chris, did you have anything else you wanted to add at this point? Because I don't want to beat a dead horse.
Articulating my position.
Yeah.
I think a little bit of issue with the notion that because I'm going through an adoption, somehow I can't be objective about it. I don't agree with it.
I'm not sure that was presented. If that was intended by somebody else, I would speak for them.
I'm just acknowledging it.
I thought that it helped you relate to it more emotionally in a way that none of us can.
Yeah.
Say again, Chris. I'm sorry, you've completely frozen.
I'll relate to it in a way professionally that maybe you don't. I've been in healthcare for almost 30 years. I've seen the results of failed abortions, and it's pretty gruesome. In fact, it's way gruesome.
Yeah, that's also something to consider.
Happens when medical abortions go wrong and the children are born. And to be quite frank with you, how hard it would be for the 15-year-old girl to get along with a child doesn't quite stack up to the life of a child that underwent a failed abortion.
Well, let me ask you this, Chris. How often? what kind of medical abortion goes wrong such that the child is born? Was it a late-term abortion?
It would have to be if it lives for any time.
And those are very rare. So, like, what percentage of a very rare type of abortion goes wrong? Because I would think that it's a very rare percentage of any medical procedure that would go wrong. So, how could a very rare percentage of a very rare procedure go wrong?
Well, I mean, not necessarily illegal. Like, it's illegal to do it after a certain amount of weeks.
Right.
I'm not talking about late-term abortions because those are illegal, I think, everywhere or most places. I'm talking about failed early-term medical abortions. People that take Methotrex or Methotrexate, it just is medically aborted and it's not, and they don't follow up, and then they discover a month later that they're still pregnant, and they don't get any follow-up care. And these children are born with massive genetic problems.
Well,
the thing is, you're talking about a percentage of the population that probably isn't educated in childhood development. I mean, I think that also goes to the issue, you know? Someone who takes some pills that thinks the problem's going to go away, then it doesn't, and then it's kind of like hanging around being pregnant. That doesn't sound like they're very educated on their body.
Also, I mean, really, how many failed medical abortions have you seen in your career?
A few, and I'm not sure that from my.
Is that between 5 and 10? Is that less than 5? Is that more than 30? I mean, give us like a range here. I mean, are we talking about a fucking unicorn, or are we talking about a legitimate?
But I mean, is it over 50?
Basis?
No, is it over 50?
It's not over 50. It's probably between 5 and 20. But
years that you've been a NICU nurse.
Well, I've done more than just been a NICU nurse. But here's.
So, I mean, just give me the time frame. So, between 5 and 20, over how many years?
Or give us the proportion of, like, how many babies you've seen, those that have been that specific type of baby.
Well, I mean, it's between 5 and 20 over how long time frame?
Well, I've been in healthcare for 30 years.
Okay, so between 5 and 20 babies total that you've seen over the course of 30 years in healthcare, working in one of the largest children's hospitals in the state. Just a percent. I'm not trying to say.
Wait a minute. I'm not a court law, so I'm going to speak my mind here.
You got to be careful, sorry. These are tough waters. Go ahead.
Oh, trust me, one is too many. Me down on a number or percentage. 0.00001% is too many. There's no acceptable number here.
I mean, there's no. I think that's unfair.
It up as if it's a repeated problem that you have seen on a day-to-day basis, and now you're telling me it's between 5 and 20 over the course of 30 years. So, like, I get that you can those 5 It's the one thing that you keep going back to when we have this discussion. So, for it to be statistically relevant, it has to be more than 5 to 20 over the course of a 30-year period. Like,
why does it have to be more than that to be relevant?
Because you keep using it as a reason why, abortion should be illegal across the board. Like,
because you're coming from an anecdotal experience and arguing sort of normative policy that should be. That should be, universal more or less and affect everyone based on certain specific anecdotal, outcomes that are extremely negative, and I understand that those are horrible things to happen. Go ahead.
I heard earlier, the reference of abortion being used as birth control, and I mean, and now it's these rare abortions that cause horrible birth defects, and I guess I just don't understand why you are against it now if you also appreciate that we as a society don't take care of those who are most at risk. And it feels as if we as a society are placing such harsh judgments on people who are in an extremely high-risk pool of having to make this utterly horrible decision that I don't think that they should have to make, and I don't understand. I don't understand how we can be so judgmental of people in this high-risk pool without the resources, and I don't think that it's persuasive to say something, along the lines of, well, sometimes 5 out of 20 over the course of 30 years have resulted in people being born with horrific genetic defects. Because that just doesn't seem like it really has a significant bearing on what the actual issue is, which is...
Let me say this, all right. In 2013, there were about 660,000 abortions. % of abortion resulting from...
Your sound is...
You're cutting out on us a little bit. Could you say that again, please?
Can you hear me?
No, I can hear you now.
Okay. So according to the CDC, about 660,000 abortions were performed in 2013. 1% of abortions can be considered failed abortions. So that's about 1,600 abortions that were failed that would be considered failed abortions in 2013.
What's the definition of a failed abortion? Like, I'm asking, like, are these what you're talking about, like basically taking Plan B and it not working?
No, I'm not talking about Plan B. I'm talking about people who go in and take like the true abortion pill, like methylprednisolone or methotrexate. There's a whole handful of people that actually go in and take an abortion pill and end up carrying the infant anyway, or the fetus anyway.
But I think that's actually inaccurate. A failed abortion also means whenever they do the section method of abortion and some of the tissue is left behind.
But doesn't necessarily result in...
Partial birth is where you're like, they're already entering the birth canal, I thought.
Yeah, partial birth that's a totally different thing. A failed abortion also sometimes whenever certain tissue is not fully evacuated from the
process.
Yeah, I think, and Haley, you touched on this earlier yourself. I mean, we can argue the nitty gritty of development of what happens in the case of a failed abortion. We can talk about personhood and all these things. None of this really provides a solution. None of this really assuages the situation when you have a pregnant teenager and whether or not she goes through with this or she has an abortion and the socioeconomic outcomes of this. There's something I tried to touch on a minute ago. There was I've seen, I can't remember if it was a documentary what it was, but it was called Freakonomics, and then there's a book, and I think there's actually a sequel to the book, but they talk about
decreased crime rate,
about the impact of crime rate of the legalization of abortion. It was like the Czech Republic or someplace like that, and they showed that like
no. It was a comparison of the Czech Republic with New York.
Right.
Yes, in general, but yeah.
Yeah, and showing that basically, we can say that it's horrible and immoral to have these abortions, but you see, 20 so years later in the Czech Republic, the impact on crime, essentially of people not having kids that they didn't want and don't know how to care for, and you see the life outcomes of these people, essentially because they don't exist in the Czech Republic, the impact that has on crime versus, what we have, in the U.S., I guess in New York.
You had the opposite. They outlawed the Czech Republic, and they had just this utter increase of...
I have it backwards. Okay, I apologize. It's been a while since I've seen it.
The late 70s and early 80s, America was going through a crime wave, but they were having the constant blackouts that were going on in New York, and crime was steadily increasing, and everyone's just like, what is going to happen in the future? And then Rudy Giuliani got elected mayor of New York, and he was like, well, the reason why crime increases is because of me. But some people did some math, and they were like, hey, Roe v. Wade happened in the mid-70s, and now we're in the mid-90s, and this crime wave that we were expecting because it was continuing to increase didn't happen. And all right, maybe it was because of Rudy Giuliani, but...
yeah, he had this whole broken windows thing and this ultra hard crackdown on petty, and it was really bullshit. It had, it was, sort of the people were engaged in the false cause fallacy with regards to crediting Giuliani for any of that.
But the punchline to that whole story is that if women choose not to have children, they probably have a good reason for it, and we should trust their judgment, because as cognizant adults with a brain and people, we should trust them to make decisions about their own body autonomy, which is the point.
Didn't we just say a little while ago they don't have enough education or information to make right decisions?
I'll be right back.
I didn't say that. I honestly don't think that you have any right to say that abortion should be illegal until you put your fucking money where your mouth is and do sex education right. Until you do that, until the Republicans do that, you have absolutely no right to talk about getting rid of abortion. It's fucking horseshit. That's just what it is. That's horseshit. So, that's just my personal opinion, obviously. I didn't say any of that. I do agree that there are a lot of people who are uninformed about, the way that babies are made. Have heard some interesting things, like if you have sex standing up, you can't get pregnant, and that doesn't even make any sense. But apparently some people believe that. That's not the first time that people believed old wives' tales when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I do think it is important to recognize that the people who are going to be disparately impacted if you outlaw abortion are low-income women of color. That's what we've seen bear out in Texas when we have extremely restrictive laws on getting abortions. It's just true. And I don't think that it is fair to force a person to incubate another life for 9 to 10 months against their will, considering the incredible psychological, medical, financial obligations that would impose. Pregnancy is not a walk in the park, and I don't think anyone who's ever been pregnant will tell you that. I have a lot of friends who have almost died giving birth, and do they regret it? Certainly not. But they wanted those kids, and I don't think it's right for any of us to tell some woman that she has to do that because we don't trust her to make a decision about what to do with her own body.
I actually know someone who died in childbirth.
It's not uncommon. We have the highest mortality rate of the industrialized world.
It's ridiculously.
It's not even just dying before they give birth. It's dying in the 72 hours after they give birth.
That's when my friend died. She died in the 72 hours after giving birth.
Yeah. It's not uncommon. It's not uncommon. I think we all know
it's actually it's a very weird, freaky statistic about America. We have a very, very high portion of women dying in the hours after giving birth. And I actually think that also goes to our lack of education of women's health here. Our actual lack of respect for it. I don't even know. I don't know why.
It's a fundamental lack of respect.
Yes, babies are good, babies are great, we need babies, but let's care about the uteruses, guys.
Maybe the women attached to the uterus.
Maybe, but...
Speaking of women attached to uteruses, my wife is telling me that my time is over, so I'm going to have to take it.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to wrap. Chris, I appreciate your valor in joining us tonight and offering some strong opinions. I think we kept it fairly copacetic and got our point. I think ultimately we all want the same thing. We just have a difference in perspective on how to attain that. So in that spirit, thank you all for fermenting with me tonight. It was enjoyable. I just drank a jar of moonshine, so I'm feeling pretty good. Go Tennessee! But yeah, it's been a good conversation. I enjoyed it. We got to hit on vouchers. We got, and see, the thing is that, we have what we are on paper: pro-life, pro-choice, pro-voucher, anti-voucher. We got to delve a little bit deeper than that and experience a little bit more nuance. Even if maybe nobody's mind was ultimately changed tonight, we got to go a little bit deeper than social media normally allows us for. That's part of what we're trying to do with Fermenting Opinions. So I appreciate all of you for joining me tonight. I had fun. I hope you guys did too. Happy birthday, Haley.
Yeah.
And on that fine note, that is going to be it for tonight.
Yeah, good night, Chris's wife.
Yeah, right?
She drank half a bottle of wine. She's ready.
She's ready. Yeah, I hear you. I don't know what's going on. Y'all take care. Thank you for joining us. Till next time, guys.
Good night.